All right, welcome fellow coder back to this next lesson in our ongoing series where we are building a real-world web application using a React.js front end and a Spring Boot back end and clobbering them together for maximum awesomeness. In this lesson, we are diving into our continuation on our journey of implementing JSON Web Tokens in terms of using those for our security layer of our application. So if that sounds good, let's get into it. All right, so last we spoke, we were having a bug here. We're having some trouble with a null pointer exception because this was an OR, and it would be false here because the header would be null because it would not have the authorization in the header if we just send a regular old request without any authorization in the header. It will be null, so header, this value will be null. So this will be false, but because it's an OR, it will try to do this. The problem is that when you say header dot starts with, if header is null, header dot anything will be a null pointer exception. So what we need to do is tweak this to say, hey, if we have text and the header doesn't start with bearer, then we should do this. We should also have an OR. So we should say string utils has text, or rather doesn't have text for header, header, or, and then we wrap this next two in brackets. So if this is true now, true or anything, the OR won't happen because we should do a shortcut OR on it. So if this is true, meaning the header is empty, then we will go ahead and shortcut it and just go ahead and skip through and do the remaining filter steps and whatnot. So that should fix our one bug that we had. Let me go ahead and fire it up. And then I will bring in a tab over here, go to localhost 8080, and what do we see? Oh, we hit our breakpoint, right. So in here, we should see that it goes into chain.doFilter without throwing an exception, and then it will return, very good. So it will be unauthenticated, which is good. We see the 401 exception, and there is no stack trace error in our log. So we don't see a null pointer exception. That is expected. I would expect to see it not be authenticated, or rather not authorized or authenticated. You get a 401 exception. But there's no error happening in the log. There's no stack trace in the log. So perfect. That is what I expected to see. So now that we have implemented that part of the picture, I thought there was one more little housekeeping item I wanted to, I can't remember. I thought I wanted to do something and tidy something up. And of course, I can't recall anymore what it was. Oh, that's okay. I'm sure we'll find it as we're going through our code. So next, what we need to figure out here is, let me open up my stuff. We need to have a mechanism whereby a user can log in. Because right now, basically what's going to happen is whenever we hit any endpoint, we can even, first of all, we're not passing any sort of bearer authentication bearer token. We're not passing a JWT to it at all. So no matter what we do, we're going to get denied access. So we need to have a means of generating a a token, right? So right now, all we can do is validate a token. All right, we go in here. Even if we pass in a header, we don't have any tokens, so we can't pass anything in here. So we need to generate a token. So how do we generate a token? Well, in our JWT util, code here, I believe there is a way for generating a token, right? Here it is. Generate a token. You generate it by passing in a user details, which just means a user object, a valid user object. If I do Control-Shift-G while selecting this method, I can see where this method is used in my code. And as you can see in the search area at the bottom, there are no hits. Nothing is found for the usage of this generate token method. So what that means is we need to use it somewhere, ladies and gentlemen. So when would we want to generate a token? We want to generate a JWT, a JSON Web Token, when someone has properly logged themselves in, properly authenticated themselves, right? So we need to have some sort of code that accepts the user login process and then generates some, some code, what's it called? Allows them to log in with username and password, and then generates a JSON Web Token, right? So how do we do that? How do we have them sort of log in somewhere? All right, so to build out this mechanism, we will need to have sort of an API endpoint for logging in, essentially, right? So we need to expose an endpoint, meaning a URL that is not blocked by our security layer, which allows all traffic to, or permits all traffic to come through without asking them to, first be authenticated. Because to authenticate yourself, you have to be able to visit a login page without being blocked from the login page because you have to authenticate yourself, right? That would be a circular dependency or circular, situation there. So anyway, we need to define our first sort of API endpoint. So that's usually via a controller. So I'm going to create a new class. This is going to be in a web package, because that's where we would put our controllers, .web. And these controllers will essentially all be as part of the API endpoints. So we'll call this let's call it the login controller, or maybe auth controller, or authentication. Let's call it auth controller because I'm lazy. Cool. So we'll annotate this as a REST controller, okay, and the request mapping endpoint will be /API /auth, I guess. Control-Shift-O to import our thingies, our annotations, and then from here we can define a, let's say, post mapping on the login. So /API /auth /login will be the endpoint. And in here, this will return a response entity. I'll explain that in a moment. We'll call this just, login. And this will take some sort of credentials, right? Authentication credential, auth, credentials request, auth request. We'll just call it request. This is an object I will create myself. This is not something that already exists. Let's import post mapping and let's import response entity. Let's create this guy. So I'm going to create this class. It's a request, So it's like a DTO essentially. So a data transfer object. We're not going to store this information in the database. So we're just using this as a means to pass data along. What this guy's going to have is a username and a password, because that's what a user will require to authenticate themselves in my system. So there you go. Auth credentials request is just a simple getter setter, with private fields, username and password. So boom, that will be that. And then this, for now, will return a response entity dot okay. For now, the body will be null. Cool. So that way we get rid of all the compilation errors. Let me stop my server. So basically, what this will do is we're gonna receive credentials, and then we're going to essentially, I guess, validate the credentials, right? I assume that's what will have to happen here. Yeah. Okay. And we'll allow the traffic to this endpoint to come through. We'll allow all the endpoints here to be sort of opened up. So we do that via the security config file. Security config right here is where we're saying forcefully make every single request have to be authenticated. But instead, in between making every single request have to be authenticated, you can add something called an ant matcher. With a pattern. So we can say, hey, if the pattern matches /API /auth /*, meaning anything else beyond that, then let's do a .permit all there. So that will permit all the traffic to come into this endpoint and all the other endpoints that are nested within API/auth, it won't do any sort of security filtering on it. So it'll allow the traffic to come through, and we should be good to go with allowing that traffic to hit our controller without first being routed through all of our security stuff. So now that we should be able to make a request to this endpoint and pass in our credentials. So, I mean, when we have credentials here, I feel like we should pass them through our Spring security stuff, but maybe that will happen once we have, I think does that happen once we go through the JWT filter? I don't want to do it twice, right? I don't want to validate them twice. So we have we set the authentication here. That's where the magic happens, as I say. But I don't think in this filter oh, right here. We find by username. But we don't do anything with the password, right? We don't do any password validation. I'm not sure. We'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see if we can trick our system. So anyway, basically what I'm saying is if we don't do anything with our user details service, and we just accept these credentials and just move forward with them in our code, then hey, we'll see. We'll see what happens. So, okay, in the code here, let me just scroll down and get to the point where I want to be in this article that I'm going through. Again, for the sake of transparency, I'm going through a TopTal article where they show you how to do some authentication with it. There's some examples of how they permit all their traffic and whatnot through that endpoint that I was just setting up. Where was this is testing. Where was the example of do internal here? They had an auth API as well. So they chose, request mapping to be API/public. To each their own. They have a post mapping here. So this is basically the code that I need to recreate. I can just copy paste it because hey, that's what I'm all about. And then we can figure out how I'll walk you through this code, right? Again, I could type this all out, one by one, line by line for you guys. It just makes these videos take so much longer, and I'm perfectly fine. I think it's perfectly fine to go through and explain every single line of code as we're going through it so that you understand everything and it's not just a blur. So first thing we do is the authentication manager. We need to inject that in here, but we don't have access to the authentication manager right now because it needs to be accessible as a component that we can pull from in the security config. In other words, kind of part of this guy, right? So I think they defined how we can do that. They have a bean that you can inject in here. So the authentication manager can come from the authentication manager bean, which I believe it's they say super dot whatever, so this probably comes from web security configurer adapter. Somewhere in here there's probably an authentication manager here, right? So there's an authentication manager here that we're probably grabbing, right? So we say, oop, where'd it go? Sorry. Authentication manager bean. Oh, there's an actual method. So where is it? Show me this method. Right here, authentication manager bean is a public method and allows us to grab the authentication manager, which we have here. And then with that authentication manager, now that it is a bean and it's called authentication manager bean, we can then auto wire that in here to our sort of heart's content. So we can say, what was the type again? Sorry, go back. The type here, is authentication manager. So this is the type that is being stored inside of the Spring application context. So that's what we can inject over here. So we can say private authentication manager, authentication manager, and this we can auto wire now. Okay, so it's going to grab from the, I just did Control-Shift-O to import, and now it said, hey, what's HTTP headers? That comes from Spring Framework. What's user? That comes from our domain. What's authentication? That comes from Spring Security. There. So with this authentication manager, we can now use it in here because it's grabbing it from the, application context. Okay, I'll rename my what you call it here variable, my parameter to request instead of just req, because the code I copy pasted uses request. Fair enough. So we can grab that from username password from my credentials. And then JWT, we need to inject this as well. The token util, which I just call JWT util. Something we created in a previous video. We can auto wire that bad boy in. JWT util. Control-Shift-O to import. It comes from my application. We defined it. Generate access token. Okay, so is it access token? I think it's just called generate token. Yeah, so generate token is the method that we created. We're passing in a user, which is okay because user is of type. It implements the interface user details right here. User implements user details. We did that earlier. And that's what the generate token wants, is a user details type. And that's okay. What is this? User view mapper to user view. Interesting. That's a mapper that I don't really know what it's doing. So what is this doing? It's returning a response entity of OK. It's adding in the header authorization. It's generating a token. And in the body, it is to user view. What would the body be here? Do we need to user view? I guess what it's trying to say is it's trying to... I'm not sure what that would be doing. Do they outline that in their article? They probably don't. User view mapper. Yeah, they don't say what that is. So this is one of the reasons why back in like 2012, I started my business teaching, and these are the kinds of things that frustrate me, right? You post a big, long article. It is great. It's a great article, except for the fact that there are missing pieces. So I am now left to guess what this user view mapper is. Now, they might have like an actual... they may have posted their repository or something somewhere, and I just didn't have a look at it. So if they posted their code somewhere in a some sort of a GitHub repo or something, I could go there and take a look at it. I just hadn't seen that in... Oh, maybe they did it in their bookstore web application. Anyway, so yeah, they might have it in here. Let me just have a peek here so you guys can see what I'm doing. There's a Spring Security example. Let me see if I go main, not resources, sorry. IO example. Do they have something to do with, where would that guy be? API? User or auth API, which is what I think we were looking at, right? Did they have, yeah, user view mapper. Okay, so show me what this is. User view mapper. I want to look at that. Where is that? Where is user view mapper? IO example domain mapper user view mapper. Okay, IO example domain mapper user view mapper. IO example, wasn't it mapper? Or was it oops, example API auth. So hold on. Where was it? IO example, domain, sorry, domain. So IO example, not API, but domain mapper, there we go, user view mapper. Now we can see the code. So they don't include this in the article directly. They don't have, so they assume that you're going to just do this and figure it out. So it's kind of annoying, but anyway. What is this? What is the user view mapper? So component model Spring uses object ID mapper to user view. To user view is a public abstract that returns a list of user view objects. Okay. And what is a user view object? Domain DTO user view. Domain DTO user view. It's just an ID, username, and full name. Okay. So this is just, it's just data. Okay. So this is just saying return the user detail, like return a sort of a view of the user, meaning I guess it might strip out some of the sensitive information. It's just returning the details of the user back in the body. You don't have to do that. I mean, you could just probably say user as the body, and then do it that way. But doing that, you would also expose the password, and that's probably not a good thing. So that's probably why they wanted to sort of create a view of it to remove password potentially. So anyway, I forgot if they did they remove the password? Yeah, they said they had ID, username, and full name. So anyway, that's not critical. So what we have here is we have an endpoint that is now exposed. It's open, where we can go to login, pass in a request, and then get a JSON Web Token built for us, right? So how do we do that? Well, one great solution is to use Postman. I have the Postman agent installed on my computer already. If you don't have Postman, I'd recommend it. It's great for testing out these kinds of endpoints. Excuse me. I'm just signing in right now to my my Postman account so that you guys, I'm not going to bore you with those details. So I'm just going to bring that over here. So here I am. So I'm just going to go to like my workspace because I think I have some, workspace stuff opened. So in here I can click new tab, and here we can do get, post, put, push, delete, whatever, patch, put, head, options, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to do a post, right? Because our endpoint that we want to test is a post mapping. And the URL is localhost 8080/API/auth/login. So it's http ://localhost 8080/API/auth/login. Okay. Now this is a REST controller, and we have an object, a Java object here. So I'm assuming it's going to be in the body is going to be raw JSON type text. So we'll have a JSON object. Key value pairs. So key value, what is the key? The key is username, and password are the two keys. So username is what? And the password is what? Okay. Now here's the curveball. We don't have a username and a password in our database right now, and we actually have this hooked up to the database. So if I said like Trevor, password ASDF, and then sent this over, what happens? So localhost 8080 could not send. Oh, my server's not running. So I need to run my server. Okay. Now I probably should have went in debug mode and looked in the Java, in the, where'd it go? The auth controller. I should have put a breakpoint in here, but let's just YOLO it, hit send again, see what happens. So 401 unauthorized. Interesting. Okay. Good. That's actually, that is expected. I was expecting to be unauthorized because Trevor and ASDF does not exist in our application, in our database. Great. So let's open up our database and let's go to, let me refresh the select star from users. Right now, there are no users in our database. Normally, you'd have a front end that you would be able to leverage to register a new user account and all that stuff. We don't have that yet, so I'm just going to brute force my way into it. I'm going to insert into my database, insert into users, values. I think, can I get away with not specifying the, oh, I think I have to specify the columns because ID is auto-generated, so cohort, start date, password, username, and then the values, cohort start date, I think it's just a date, we'll say, I don't know, 2022-01-01. Password will be ASDF, and the username will be Trevor. Cool, insert, done. So now if I say select star from users, boom, we have a user. But there's one more important thing. We also have select star from authority. Remember that the authority table are roles. So when we insert a user, the user has to have a role, because the roles that we expect, at least one of them are, the role that we expect is a student role. So we can also say insert into authority and user ID. So the user ID that just got created was ID 1 right here. So we'll say values, the ID will be 1. Oh, sorry, the authority, my apologies. The authority is role student, and the user ID is 1. There. So now we inserted into both authority and user. So we have our authentication and our authorization. Authentication is the users table. Authorization is the authority table. So beautiful. Now, if I send my post request again, I'm interested to see what happens. Where is my... So Trevor and ASDF, ASDF. If I send it again, I still get unauthorized. Okay. Interesting. So why is that? Let's put a breakpoint in there and let's reboot the app in debug mode. Sorry, I still have a cold I'm trying to get over. Great. So we've started up, and let's go back to our local host, Postman, hit go, boom, it hits our breakpoint. Let's see what is happening. So our request, oh, well, our request has nothing. Password and username is null. So my bad. We, so I forgot an annotation. My apologies. This is a bug. Oops. Doing it this way, with a REST controller, you need to specify that this is the request body. Okay, so Control-Shift-O to import that from Spring Framework Web, bind, whatever annotations. This guy, and I'll save it and fire my server back up. So when I sent the post, there was a body, right? I'm in the body portion of this. This is the request body. You need to annotate your request body here with the appropriate annotation in order for it to recognize that and bind the information between this request and the server-side data. So when I say send again, hopefully now we have data in here. There we go. ASDF, ASDF, and Trevor. Cool, cool, cool. We do our authenticate stuff. Letting it play through. I'm stuck in a breakpoint. Oh, unauthorized. So why encoded password does not look like bcrypt? Okay, right. Sorry. Good. That's actually good. We that's what we want to see. So first of all, here's the authenticate step. I didn't see this. Authentication manager.authenticate. I said I was going to explain this to you guys, and I never did. We grab our authentication manager, and we do the authentication step right here. We authenticate by passing in a new username password token. So this authenticate step, I believe, leverages our user detail service to do the authentication process, because as you can see, it does do a select from the user by username. So that is the magic happening. It is doing authentication on username and password here, and we proved it because, hey, it grabbed that password and it didn't look like it was encoded properly. So, whoops, we need to encode that password. So storing unencoded, in other words, raw passwords in your database is a big no-no. That's the whole point for using bcrypt. So we just need to quickly generate a bcrypted, an encrypted version of that password, ASDF, ASDF. We could probably do that in like a test, like some silly little test. Let me do a new, I don't know, we'll call this password encoder test at test public void, encode password. Okay, and we'll have it create a new, well, I'll just create it right here. So password encoder equals new bcrypt, bcrypt password encoder, like that, and then we'll say password encoder dot encode a raw password ASDF, and we will have it do a system out on that. So we'll have it print out that raw password to the console. I'm going to run this as a test. Boom, there it is. That's the encoded version of that password. Let's go back to our database, and in this password field for this user, I'm going to paste in that encoded password and apply. So that will save it. So now when I say select start from users, the password is now encoded. And now that we have an encoded password, we can run our assignment submission app again. and have it boot up. Very good. And now in our localhost 8080 whatever API auth login, Postman post with Trevor and ASDF, these are valid credentials. I mean, it should give me something other than a 401 exception or error or response. Holy cow, there it is. We got the user. Perfect. So we had a 200 response, okay, and we have all the details of the user because remember that's what we passed into the body in our code in the auth credentials, auth controller. We have the body here which has the user information. Now in the header, here in the header, look, authorization. This guy is our JSON Web Token. Copy. So this authorization header has our JSON Web Token. So this is our token that contains all this information. And we can go to a JWT, I don't know, reader or something tool. There's got to be some sort of a reader or debugger. Yeah. So here's an example of an encoded JWT. I'm going to paste in mine. So watch this. Paste. And here we go. So, oops. Hey, scroll back up. There we go. So sub is the, I forgot what these stand for, what subject, whom the token refers to. So Trevor, this is my username, right? My username is Trevor. There it is. It's decoded that from the header. EXP is when this guy expires. This guy expires, what did I say, 30 days from now? January 13th, 2022. That is actually 30 days from now. Fantastic. What's this guy? Issued at, today is currently December 14th that I'm recording this. There you go. Fantastic. So that's the payload of the data. If you want to store more data, that's where you need to start adding more claims in your JSON Web Token. That's slightly more advanced, but there you go. I mean, we have now all the fundamentals in place to properly build out a front end now. Now, I don't love that it's passing the entire user object in the body, so we probably should do something like, user.set password to be null or something, and then send it in the body just to, scrub out the password or something. That could be one way to solve the problem of exposing the password. So if I reboot and then come over here into our Postman and repost my data, now you can see password is null, right? I disabled the password, or I deleted the password. So now it's just a little bit less, it's a little bit better in terms, it's less leaky, right? And we see our authorities are here, all the other stuff is here, great. So fantastic. We now have everything we need to get started with the front end of this application. So now there's gonna be more probably intricacies with our, authorization stuff here, but we've got a great start. So awesome. Now I think in the next video, we'll dive into the front end and we'll start to talk about React, which is always fun. And if you are loving these videos, don't forget to give it a like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to learn from me directly, if you want me to be your mentor, you can join one of our boot camps. coderscampus.com/bootcamp. If you're looking to get a job as a coder, if you love this stuff, if you're passionate about this stuff, but you get stuck all the time because it's really, really, really difficult, as you see me struggling, you need mentorship, you need guidance, you need deadlines, you need accountability, you need community, you need one-on-one support, you need group support, you need everything under the sun to help to train you on this skill set so that you can get a job as a programmer. So we have that in our boot camp. So we have 6-month and 9-month long boot camps. 9-month long. If you're completely brand new to code, you've never coded in your entire life, you'll probably need a 9-month boot camp. If you've got a bit more of the fundamentals in place, you've done loops, you've done variables, you understand methods pretty well, inputs, outputs, that kind of thing. You understand method signatures and just some of the fundamentals of coding. And maybe you've coded some small console-based applications or something, then great, you're probably a shoe-in for our 6-month boot camp, where, like I said, that your goal is to learn all this stuff in order to get a job. So if you have about 20 hours a week in your schedule, and this stuff is, if you're passionate about the stuff and love this stuff and want to help want to get help getting a job quickly, yeah, go ahead. coderscampus.com/bootcamp. Apply for our next bootcamp. We run them every single month. And hey, maybe even more frequently if you're watching this well into the future. So go ahead there, apply, and we look forward to seeing your application and hopefully hopping on a call with you to figure out if you would be a good fit for the bootcamp and vice versa. Thanks so much for listening. Can't wait to see you in the next video. As always, take care of yourself. Happy learning, and bye for now.